paying attention, but like I like sing the music at the beginning. And if you pay attention, I was like, right when we start. That's because I'm singing the music, and it's my. I'll do another quick shout out for this. It's my personal theme song that was created for me. And if you're looking for a personal theme song for yourself, I didn't create it myself. I don't have that kind of musical capacity, but I do know somebody, Andy Fellows, that you should follow or that you should connect with. Anyway, or I could connect you with him.
Yes,
He's amazing.
Fantastic.
Yes, great work, and I love it. And it gets me going every time for another episode of The Conversation Show. And I'm really excited to have my very good friend, Lindsay Harle-Kadatz, with us today. And we're going to be talking about something that I think is pretty topical right now, because if we were all going to say, are we living in times of change? I think we would probably say yes. And maybe even more so that since the COVID-19 pandemic, there seems to be this increase in change, right? Like change is coming more and more frequently. And there are some things that we have potentially done historically in times of change that maybe aren't working the same way we thought they were going to work. And we're going to be talking about one of those things today, which is the concept of rebranding. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with Lindsay, because both her and I have different perspectives on branding, unique perspectives on branding. And this is about exploring, what do people think branding is? What do people think a rebrand will accomplish? What is a brand actually? How does that come to life? Where do values come into play? Where do colors and taglines come into play? And all of these different pieces of the conversation that maybe haven't all been brought together into one conversation. So super excited to have this conversation with you today, Lindsay. Before we get started, I already kind of started, but before we go too deep, for those of the viewers who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why is this a conversation that you were super excited to have?
Yeah. So hi, I'm Lindsay Harle-Kadatz, and I'm a business consultant, business advisor, specifically who utilizes brand and culture for greater team alignment, greater team productivity, optimizing people in their behaviors and their mindsets, all that wonderful jazz. Why was I, when you said, what shall we talk about? That's not how I hear Tracy. It's just
that's like the Muppet version of Tracy. Yeah.
If Tracy was a Muppet, what shall we talk about? When you ask me that and you're like, values, and I'm like, of course, values. However, that can go off in any number of directions. What is particularly interesting to me over the past few years is how many companies are looking to rebrand, looking to redefine themselves, looking to understand who they are on a different level, which is wonderful. However, a rebrand will not fix something that is broken in a business. And what I've seen over time is that sometimes a rebrand is really only a Band-Aid to a misalignment in culture. So just doing a rebrand and hoping that that will fix a culture problem is not going to happen. That rebrand will waste money. It will waste resources. It very rarely will provide super duper clarity, because your people won't be bought into it. Your people won't understand it. Your people are used to acting in different ways. And so now you're throwing this brand at them, asking to act differently. And there's a whole slew of things behind that need to happen. And it's not simply rewriting catchy phrases, doing up new logos with new colors. Those things are important, yeah. But they don't fix a solution. They don't fix a problem to a deeper solution. They're not a solution. They're not a solution to a deeper problem. Thank you. Golly gosh.
Well, and I think let's start here, because I want to make sure that people understand what we're saying when we say rebrand, because I think there's what people who are brand people know a rebrand to be, and there's a rebrand as the wider market sees it, which I think is very much tied into those logos, taglines, colors, signage, maybe even things like content, right? Like how are we talking about this on social media, or what kind of advertising are we doing, and things like that. And so when you say rebrand, Lindsay, what is it that you mean?
Yeah, great question. It's the internal conversations. So it really has nothing to do with that external experience. Because if the internal experience for your people is confused, how in the world is any kind of external experience going to be consistent? And so we need to look inward first and get everyone on the same page, and everyone having buy-in, and everyone contributing, because people care about what they contribute to. It's really just a flip of branding for external marketing versus branding for internal cultural alignment.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the definitions that I love for brand is that it's the experience that you leave a room with, right? And when you think about a corporate brand, and I think all of us you either have a brand that you love, right? Like you go into a store, you go to a place, and you're just like, yes, this is my place. Or you like to wear specific brands of clothing, or any of these things. These are brand experiences that we have.
Exactly.
And we have those as employees as well. When we go to work in an organization, we are having an experience. And theoretically, that experience should be the same, right? So like
in theory,
as a brand, as a company, are out to create this type of experience for the world, so that whether it is an internal consumer or an external consumer, the experience is one of connectedness or sustainability, or there's no right or wrong thing to choose. That's one of the things that Lindsay and I agree on. There's no right or wrong values, but there are values that are real and there are values that are not. And when we're especially when we're basing on an external experience on something different than what the internal experience is created on a day-to-day, this is really what a rebrand is. It's saying, this is my experience now. That's not the experience we want to create. We want to create this experience. So we need to change some things to create this new experience. And then we can have our logo and our tagline reflect the new experience. But just working on that external piece a lot of people will sell you that as a rebrand. But what we're talking about here today, that's not what we're talking about.
Heck no. You liken it to, we can have all the external makeover and look fabulous, but if we don't do the internal work, the outside doesn't matter, because we're still going to have those same conversations with ourselves, that same confusion, that same lack of self-esteem. And so what we're asking of our people when we do this rebrand is to rewire their brain, give them a complete different definition of what values are, what are the new stories that we have, how over time, and no real change can happen overnight. And so suddenly you just have all these different new things of vision, mission, values, unique value propositions, key messages, all of that. But if we have not given our people the tools to understand what these are, to have buy-in to them, to practice them and fail at them, because you're going to fail, then we're all going to fall back to that old way of the old brand. Because ultimately, for me, what a brand is, it's the deeper DNA of a business, is how I define it. Yes, which also includes the experience of people, but it's really, is there an understanding of who we are as a person entity? And are we looking at this business as a person, as an entity at the table? And therefore the teams inside need to be wired properly together. So for me, I look at them as neural circuits. The individuals are the neurons. Are we properly supporting, reinforcing these new behaviors that this rebrand represent? Are we giving our people the time to really practice what this is? Are we giving them the safety to fail, learn, and then go back into that? And is this rebrand modeling of the behavior being done by the leadership team? Because there needs to be modeling for it to go right from beginning to down, right? Beginning to down, right from the top down, down, up. There we go.
Down, up, down, front, down, whatever.
Mhm.
I think everybody gets it. And I think I love this concept of the DNA. And this is something that I've been thinking of. It's especially in like if you're an entrepreneur, it's a lot clearer to you that your brand is your DNA, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
here's me, here's my business. We're pretty much the same thing, right? But when you get into a bigger organization, we forget that individual people, individual personal brands become part of the DNA.
Yep.
And so I didn't know that this is where we were going to go with this conversation, but I believe that you can go there with me. Lindsay, is that
I'll follow you, Tracy. I'll follow you.
Is it possible to change our DNA? It's like from a business perspective, right?
Okay.
So if we're saying a rebrand is really about making changes that change our DNA, how we function as an organization. Maybe this is just because I watched Jurassic Park the other day, in which case it is possible to change your DNA, but then you become something different, right? Like, what are the important things to take into consideration about what you can and what you can't change?
Yeah. So yes, absolutely, businesses can change their DNA. Has to be done intentionally. There has to be the safety to do it. I think the first time that I really started to understand that a company itself can change was when I read The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And he goes into a habit about safety with a company. And I forget what the company was about, but this specific company, they had huge accident issues, safety issues, loads of that. And a new CEO came in and said, "Why is safety one of our values and our numbers are this horrid?" And there was this conversation. It really became about the people in the business. The old CEO was basically like, nobody contact me. I don't want to hear from anybody unless they're at this level. And at this level, though, they're not really seeing the day-to-day experiences of where safety could be improved. Ooh, okay, I'm like, I saw my face go like this, of where safety could be improved. And what this new CEO said is that he gathered the entire company together in one of those town halls. He gave out his personal cell phone number and he said, "Call me if you have an idea how we can change this. I'm open. I'm here for conversation because we need to change this." And it took a while, but it really took one brave employee to say, "This is a massive issue. This is where I see change." And he called and he had a conversation with the CEO. And then they started to implement these changes. And then the safety numbers increased, got way better, decreased, increased. They improved until they had no more safety incidents. And that became their core DNA. If we are really going to say that we stand for safety, then we need to prove it. And I, as the leader of this organization, have to drop my ego, let the people who are actually getting hurt share what they see as solutions. And that changes the DNA, that changes the mindset, because now people, number one, are actively looking for solutions to safety issues that they've had. They are being given proper gear. They're being encouraged to speak way above their level, so to say, and have these more connected conversations with people at all levels. So not only does that create a deeper connection between all levels and stop those silos, but it encourages people to start purposefully looking for, how do I be safe? How do I get these numbers down? It's no longer, well, we say this, but whatever, we're just going to wait until I get hurt, I guess. It's more, how do we actively go home without any incident? And so, yeah, absolutely, you can change the DNA. And it all comes down to really reinforcing key mindsets, which are like attitudes, moods, dispositions to certain things. And how do you reinforce that in behaviors? But even more, what beliefs were behind that first? So there was that belief of I couldn't reach out to the previous CEO because he said no. And so now we're having to rework that belief of I can, and that takes time. And then once you do it, it takes practice to do it again and again and again. So it's not just here's our value, you do this, good job. It's here's a new value. Here's what we're really going to do. Now we're rewriting beliefs, which then impact our mindset, which then impact our behavior, which then impact our actions, which then impact our overall outcomes.
Okay, so Lindsay, in your example, leadership changed.
Yeah.
So we had a leader who thought one way, we had a leadership change, we had a new leader that thought a different way, who said, like, these are our values as an organization. I'm going to prioritize our values as an organization and fix the problem. How do you see, or what kind of path do you see available for those people, like where like we're not changing leadership? So we're going to maintain our leadership team, but we're going through these times of change. We know logically that we can't continue to do what we've been doing and go where we're going. So we know we need to change. And I know you're very experienced in the neuro change method. And this is like, how do people go from, I know I need to change because I want to take this company somewhere, but I probably don't know what I need to know about myself and the beliefs that I have that are driving me showing up to say, like, nobody besides this certain level can talk to me. How do we start to go about having those conversations? Because I see that as being something that is critical to the success here.
A big block. Yeah. I mean, the honest thing is that individual probably doesn't even know if they have these things that they don't see.
Right.
So it comes down to, what is the ego? Are we as a leader willing to put our ego aside to learn? If not, then I'm sorry, you're hooped. You're going to lose people. You're going to have more turnover. You're going to, if it's safety, you're going to see more incidents, and that's not okay, which will then reflect, if it's a stakeholder company, you're going to impact your stakeholders and they're going to be pissed. So it's not even I know I need to change. Very rarely is it that. It's, you need to look at the numbers. What is your board telling you? Is there a threat to your actual role because you're not producing what is really what's been dictated to you that you need to produce based on the goals of the overall org, based on the stakeholders, based on the boards? So it could be you just go into survival mode. But ultimately, it comes down to ego. Are you willing to be curious enough about yourself to see where your gaps are? And if you're not, then that's a deeper issue. And no amount of coaching, no amount of work is going to change that. It really is those come to Jesus moments of, if I don't change, then nothing will change. And as the leader, as the CEO, as a business owner or whoever, the real change that has to happen is from you. Because even if you're people who are on the front lines and creating change there, if they keep hitting these walls when it comes to you, they're going to leave. Because what's the point? We did all this work to create change. Exactly. My team loves me, all of this, and then what? And I even had a colleague say to me that she's about to leave her role, but she's really worried about the team that she's leaving behind, because they have shared with her that the only reason they're there is because of her and how she protects them from the neuroses.
I call them dragons.
Yeah, I like that. From the dragons above who aren't willing to change, but she's now leaving. So it's what do you want at the end of the day? Turnover, which is way more costly, or are you wanting to change and maybe invest in yourself? And investing in yourself is never the wrong way to go, I believe.
I believe as well. And also, you should tell your friend to chat with, like, literally, that was my experience. The reason that I was staying there is because I was like, what is going to happen to my staff when I
Yeah.
leave? And I'll tell you, within 6 months, all of them left.
Yeah. And
and
yeah, it's so common. And it's
and they all have
so
jobs,
common.
right? They all
Yeah.
found jobs. They are like, I gave a whole bunch of them references, right? Because they were awesome.
Yeah.
And you just can't, you have to do what's best for you. And sometimes that's what's best for other people as well. It just pushes them to see, like, am I actually willing to stay and deal with this when I don't have someone defending the dragons? And maybe it's an opportunity for them to learn how to defend themselves from dragons, which is also a good thing for people.
Which is also a good thing. And it then allows them to, because loyalty is a beautiful thing, but it can also be a very harmful thing to your own self.
Mm-hmm.
If it keeps you from growing, from realizing your own goals, from stepping out and going after what you want. Absolutely. And keeping you small. And so loyalty is definitely a two-edged sword.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm really interested. So Jay is sharing here. In my experience, companies are dominated by one or two personalities within the business. I think that's fairly common. I've experienced that, and I've even been one of those personalities. So to achieve change, those personalities have to be willing to make change. And I think, so Lindsay, you very politically correctly challenged those leaders to explore, to get curious about themselves, right? And one of the things that I have found when it comes to ego is, I like to go bold with this. Are you willing to be wrong? Are you willing for this to not have worked because of you? Right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes that is what the case is, right? And now, if you're willing to admit that, and you're willing to explore and get curious and go in different directions, then we have the opportunity to do something different. But if you're, it's good. I never frown upon exploring and getting curious, but there is still this level of like, let's be curious. And then this ties into what Andrew is saying, is if you begin to talk about change, that you need to make change happen, but then you don't really do anything, people will be like, oh yeah, like you said, people will go back to the old habits, because old habits are easy to go back to. So like, how much of this is a person, one person, the CEO, the corporate, like the business owner, saying like, okay, I'm willing to accept that maybe what's keeping us stuck is me. How much of it is that, and how much of it can be influenced by other team members?
I mean, obviously that's a case by case, what's the word, basis, not a hard word. But if you are committed and willing to make these changes and willing to be wrong, which is a very hard thing to do, particularly if you've never done it before. I'm wrong all the time. So it's, okay,
me too. I'm just used to it by now.
Opportunity. But if you are making a concerted effort to change, modeling, showing, sharing this with your people as well, then unless somebody's just not a right fit in that company and how things are going to, and how things are moving forward, it will influence in a positive way. And people then will self-select out. If you give it the good old try for even 30 days and you don't see any results, well, then you really haven't given it a try. Because number one, habits take a minimum of 63 days to take hold. But not only does it take that long to take hold, it then takes longer to continue to reinforce them, so that you're writing over the old way of being and continuing to make that stronger than the old way. Now, when it comes to the people, I mean, they could just be not a right fit. It doesn't mean they're wrong. And the thing is, when people often talk about toxic people, and I learned from our friend, Dr. Kevin Sansbury, that there is no such thing as a toxic person. No such thing. What is toxic is their behavior. And so what happens is, if, say, the CEO changes their toxic behavior, well, then they're modeling something different. If for whatever reason, though, that CEO is replaced and a new one comes in and is like honky dory, but the old toxic behavior was never addressed, that will still be lingering. So it's not necessarily addressing the person, it's addressing the behavior that is not supported by what the culture should be, what the behaviors are, what the actions, what our actual personality of the business is, and that experience and what that looks like. So it's just a matter of really identifying, well, this is the behavior. Here's why it's not a fit. And we don't go and attack the behavior because that just gets defenses up. I wish I had pretty nails.
I don't either.
Right. But it's about, here's why this doesn't fit with what we're trying to do. And if we're saying that this is what we want to do, and this is what we're saying to our clients, well, if we don't deliver, they're going to lose trust in us and they're going to split. They're going to go elsewhere. And they'll be way more loyal to another company, to another brand who does exactly what they say. And it's consistent throughout the entire company and every single interaction. And one of the companies I support, I was chatting with some of their clients, and every single client has shared they have the same consistent experience from the owners through to the individual who answers the phone, through to all their technicians. Every single different personalities, but the experience of care is there, and exploration, and not pushing a subject or pushing a product or something. It's what is in the best interest because we care about you.
And I think this speaks really clearly too of like when you have that, I'm not going to say that the DNA isn't necessarily well defined, because I feel like in these scenarios where there's kind of those toxic behaviors, the DNA is defined. This is what the DNA is, right? Like we actually don't care about the employee's work-life balance. We care about speed to market. We care about blah, blah, blah. We just haven't been brave enough to say we care about speed to market over and above our employees' personal life balance. Right?
There's no right nor wrong.
Right.
It's what's right for that company, and you get to define that.
Right. And there might be somebody early on in their career who wants to build their expertise and wants to participate in an area. And like, that's why there's no right or wrong, good or bad. It's just that the misalignment is the problem. And Samina said that earlier up here somewhere in the chat too, about the alignment, right? If you don't have alignment, then you have the disconnection. And this is what I thought I was going to get when I came to work here, but this is what I got. And so Lindsay, I always have this is a question, maybe it's a like chicken and egg and there's really no answer, but like I see two possibilities in this scenario, right? Where we have the misalignment. So let's just say we've gotten to the point where we've identified a misalignment. So our brain says, okay, now I might want to look at a rebrand because I've identified this misalignment. I see two paths that we can accept that this is our DNA and own it and like make it public, add that to our external experience, say like, this is what we are about and we own this. Or there's the shift, which then I consider is our changing our DNA, which I actually think is the harder shift, right? Changing your DNA is harder than saying like, well, this is what we thought we wanted to be, but we realized we're this and we're going to own this and we're just going to go with it, right? Like, it's like Tesla saying everybody has to come back to the office, otherwise you're fired, right? Like that's them owning their principle. And if that's what they believe to be true, great, because now I get to self-select out and be like, that's not the way I want to do business. But so when you're talking to clients, do you see this as being like two options that people give themselves, or like how does it come about that someone wants to actually, if we're saying a rebrand is like changing your DNA, what are some of those, like we talked about checking ego, but what are some of the other things that have to come into play for us to say like, okay, we can create this space of even considering a rebrand?
I mean, it's a simple question of what's going to happen if you don't. Are you okay with things being the same? If they are, okay, well then, okay, great. I'm not here
Why
to
are we
judge that.
talking?
You're just clearly not a client for me, because I don't just say, stay the same, right? That's not the goal in working with me. The goal is to become more aligned and okay with that. And it takes work and dedication. But that's really it, is okay. So what outcome do you want to achieve? And depending on their answer, you can then say, well, okay, well, what happens if we don't change? Like, what happens if you don't do anything? Is that a possibility? What do you see? Because you can't tell somebody you need this to change.
Right.
They have to walk there for themselves. Mm-hmm. All you can do is ask and sort of help them to paint that picture of, if I don't change, this is what's going to happen. Or if I start to change, here's possibility of what can happen. And that might mean letting other people lead when they are not better, but more equipped to lead in a certain way. And you can learn from them. Just because you're the leader of the company doesn't mean you need to know all. And that's a big thing, is, are you willing, exactly as you said, are you willing to be wrong? And are you willing to say, I don't know, let's figure it out together? Lean on your people. Your people will always have the answers.
I think this is just, I'm thinking about the different work scenarios that I have been in, right? And these things, and Andrew's saying sometimes tough decisions just have to be made. And I think there's, like, in this day and age, right? We've done like a 10-year jump forward in technology and how technology is impacting our business decisions because of the pandemic. And partially that's good. It was going to happen anyway. A lot of people feel not well equipped to deal with that. So we're looking at, how can I change this? How can I keep my business afloat after doing 3 rounds of layoffs, knowing that we still believe in going here and doing this work. And I think it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just me because I am inherently curious, but I always want to, like, explore where could all of these breakpoints be, right? And if we don't investigate all places, which includes ourselves, could I be the breakpoint and say, almost even, maybe it's a little bold to say with confidence, like, I'm the problem here. I would like to not be the problem here. And in order for me to not be the problem here, I need you guys to help me, right? Like, we're a team for a reason. You have your strengths, I have my strengths. Because even if, I think this is the thing, right? I always come back to, even on like an individual coaching level, just because you are a block for yourself or a business in a specific arena does not mean that you do not add value in other arenas, right? We think that, like, oh no, it's my belief in cold calling that's keeping us stuck here, right? Like, okay, maybe we can investigate other things. That does not mean that you might not be really good at negotiating, or that you may not be really good at, like, coaching your people, right? Like, it might just be a mindset of yours that for whatever reason you didn't even realize was fixed until it was challenged. And one of the things that I think when we talk about, like, fixed mindset, growth mindset, if we're even in the arena of considering rebranding, because we know we need to be different, we're experiencing times of change, we know we need to be different and rebrands and growth don't happen in a fixed mindset.
No,
they don't happen in a fixed mindset. And
effective ones don't. Right.
And a fixed business, business that is stuck, comes from fixed mindsets in people. Yay or nay?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, because what a growth mindset ultimately, even as a business, does is it looks for the opportunities. It understands that maybe we need to scale down so that we can scale up. So it's really what is it that we ultimately want to do? And that goes back to, well, what is our purpose as a business? And I mean, it's not even saying everything with you is wrong. You have to change all the way. It's okay. What is it that we need to start doing that we're not, that would potentially help us? And you know what? Even if you start doing it, it still may not be the right thing, but it might get you forward and it will teach you lessons.
Lessons.
And then what is it that we need to stop doing? And what is it that we need to continue doing? Because chances are you're doing something well. You've made it to here. And now you're not going any further. And it doesn't mean that all of this is horrid and should be thrown out and we need to start from the ground again. It's no, you've got some good things here. Look at what is good and continue to build on that. Because why throw everything out when it obviously worked to a point? And I think as well is if a leader who has previously been unwilling or not open to having these conversations with their people suddenly says, okay, come to the table, help. I'm not seeing something there's so much power in being vulnerable with your people because people are naturally wired to want to help. And so if somebody who you've seen be very closed bravely says, is inviting it, then there's something there. And you got to be curious. And leaders who have that ability to be, I don't know everything, I've got us to this point. One of the most amazing calls that I was ever on was with a company. And at the time I was doing content for them way back when. And the designer was on, I was on, the CEO and the CFO were on. And the CEO was very confused and he said something very harsh to the CFO. And then a few minutes later, as we walked through the conversation and all of that, he paused. And he said, you know what, so-and-so, I was wrong. And I'm sorry. And I should not have acted that way. And in that moment, I was like, that is a leader. That is why he's a CEO. Yeah, you know what? We're human. We are human. No one's going to be perfect, particularly in leadership positions. But to have that ability to say, I was wrong. I understand now. I am sorry for how I spoke to you. You could just see in that moment that's like, yeah. And even the CFO was like, and that's why he's our leader. You could see it.
Yeah. And that's just, I mean, one of those things about leadership that we just don't seem to recognize enough, right? Mm-hmm. Is those moments, because I've had leaders who in my entire employment with them never once showed any kind of vulnerability. And to me, I get like, we are all humans. And I think as leaders, sometimes, like I've been a leader myself, right? And sometimes we put that level of pressure on ourselves as well. We think we have to have all the answers. We think we have to know things. We have to think we know what everybody does, right? And I always had this perspective, like, we need one of me. Mm-hmm. We don't need like 10 of me. We need one of me, and we need one of you, and one of you, and one of you. And then together we make something bigger than like 10 of me, right?
A beautiful neural circuit.
Yes, it's like a brain, and it works because it has those different circuits that are firing different information, right? And it's always interesting to me because I actually think that leaders think that's what they need to do, that mm-hmm. they need to have all the answers, that they need to always know more than their team, that they need to be able to always craft an answer or solution and be the one person who's the problem solver, mm-hmm. right? And again, this is a very personal mindset, right? If we believe that as a leader about all leaders, and therefore also ourselves, because we are now leaders, then it doesn't matter what our leader or our team or anybody else think, because we have the dominating thought mm-hmm. in our behavior. Mm-hmm. And so unless we switch that to say like, well, I don't. And I think this is the shift that's happening, right? Is that mm-hmm. people are realizing I don't have the answers. The things that we used to be able to do to consistently build business or consistently build brand or consistently help our customers isn't consistent anymore. Mm-hmm. It's not mm-hmm. working, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't actually know what to do. And we're experiencing this shift for the first time, and leaders almost reaching that point, right? Like if I don't say something, like how is that going to help the business, right? Like it's not going to help. Best case scenario, we're going to keep doing what we're doing, but what we're doing is going down, 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 down. And after like 3 rounds of layoffs, we really need to think about like, where is our trajectory going here?
Mhm.
And if I want, because I think the best of all people, right? Like, I don't think anybody's trying to like destroy an organization intentionally. It's just that we don't know how our behavior or how our thought patterns are contributing to that. And so what if, right? Like, what if we explore how we interact as a team? What if we explore my mindsets is what it means to me to be a leader? How do we have conversations as a management team about what our values mean? Right? Because that can look very different between 8 different people, right? LinkedIn user, I'm not sure who you are because of the whole StreamYard thing, but it's saying being human in leadership is so necessary. Totally agree. And this is, I think, something that we have to return to. I think it's something that has kind of been deprioritized for the last 30 years in business.
Minimum.
Probably longer, but that's all I can speak to.
Yeah. That's my experience in this life. Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not saying COVID 2019 was great. It obviously wasn't. But there were absolutely leaders who completely shifted how they lead. And a colleague of mine, I remember in April of 2020, we got on the phone, we're having a conversation, and I was just like, so how's it going? She's like, I don't know. She's like, I'm so anxious. I don't know what to do with this anxiety because I do, which is why she felt very comfortable telling me. But she's like, my team is just asking me questions and I have no answers and I don't know how to answer. And I feel like they're looking at me like I should. And I don't know what to do. And I was just like, well, tell them that. Just say, you've never led through a pandemic. Goodness gracious. How could you have answers? How could you? So you're now all in this together. Yes, you are absolutely responsible for the company. Yes, you do have more on your shoulders than them to ensure that this company lives, but they're there to help make it live too. If to them, it's more than just a paycheck. And if it's more, and how do you make it more than just a paycheck? Is you involve them, you include them, you have the conversations with them, you ask them the questions, you get them engaged. And so even if we're bringing this way back to a rebrand, it's not necessary. It's rebrands that are successful are not ones that happen solely in a leadership room. Yes, that may be where the conversation starts, but those that are very impactful are those that bring everybody in, split people into different conversations of all levels, come together and see what are the commonalities between all. And then it's not the democracy that then's like, this is our brand. I mean, leadership still gets final say, but they also get to see what their people were saying. Who is actually in their company? Who could influence this? How can we include them? Because then that helps to create different career paths for them. That helps to keep them way more understanding and have ownership of their role with the brand supporting that. And that humanizes everyone. So leadership down, and you get these different silos of people having conversations who would never have had a conversation before. And that's where we get to hear differences of opinions. That's where we get to have the curiosity really challenged. But when curiosity is really challenged, that's when such beautiful things come.
Yeah. And this is like, when I think about rebranding as changing the DNA of an organization, and I think about so many people who have been unintentionally, probably both from their own perspective and from the company's perspective, ended up in a like, I'm doing this for a paycheck job.
Yep.
Right. I think if those people were invited into something bigger that made it more meaningful for them, that people are open to that. Right. Like, and it's like in my brain, it's actually the DNA like evolving, right? Because all I didn't give that person any more responsibility. I didn't give them any more money, but I invited them to the table. And I said, I see you have a role in this organization and we're going here. We want to go there. And we thought we were going there. And now we're not sure we are. Yeah. And we need other perspectives to help us see how we can go there together as a team. I think employees are hankering for that opportunity to say like, yes. I remember when I worked at the Brick very early on in my career, big Canadian retail furniture company. And like, I'm a talker, shocking.
What?
So I used to talk to all people, right? I had a couple of friends who worked in fleet, which is delivering furniture. And they would talk constantly about this and this don't work and this, and it would be so much better if we did this. And one day, me being my naive 23-year-old self that I was just like, well, why don't you talk to why don't you just tell this to the VP? Right? Like, what? And to be fair, my dad was a VP, so I had a different perspectives of who's allowed to talk to VPs. And they were like, we can't talk to him. Like, we're not allowed to talk. And I was like,
why not?
These are the people who have all the answers. Like, why are the people with the answers not allowed to talk? But I think, yes, while it might take some, this is a great example of what I like to refer to as corporate trauma. Right?
Yeah.
Like the example that you shared earlier about new CEO coming in and wanting people to talk to him. The employee's experience is that we're not allowed to talk to them, right? So even though you might be inviting me in, my experience says that is not safe. So it takes a shift to get there. But I think people want it, right? I think the people who always felt like, oh, it'd be so great if we could just do it this way, had finally a voice to say that to people and had the leeway and the spaces and all of these opportunities to share that in the way that they feel comfortable. Again, this is something that was really, really empowering for me as a leader, is that I love you were talking about start, stop, keep, right? Like, I love start, keep. What can I start doing that can help you more? What can I keep doing because you need it? And what should I stop doing because it makes your job terrible? And like, that was something, but I always told people, like, I want that feedback and I want it how you want to give it to me, right? So if you want to email it to me, cool. If you want to book a one-on-one meeting, cool. If you want to talk about it, like I prompted it weekly in our team meeting. And if you want to share it in front of everybody, I'm okay for you to share it in front of everybody. But if you don't want to share it in front of everybody, that's fine. Let's talk about it over here. There's so many ways to invite that in, but we also have to recognize that if we're looking at, let's look at it from the employee perspective. Then we talked a lot about the leader changing their DNA.
Yep, fair.
But like, now we're talking about the employee and the trickle down effect of changing that DNA. We got to give people time and space to accept that there's a new value in town. Right?
Yep, absolutely. Because they're having to rewrite.
Yeah.
And understand, well, how, if you're wanting me to have ownership of this is how we do things now, I kind of need to understand, how does that look? What does my day-to-day look like? How do I now do things? Or why do I do them now? And become way more engaged in that aspect. And I always laugh because, like, I've worked with sales teams. I've been an admin who's had to have the information of a sales team before. And let's face it, entering information into a CRM is the bane of almost every single sales individual. Oh my goodness, I have to put something into the CRM. Frick. Here's the thing. When you are able to say, this is why it's needed, because you're promising something to this client, but so-and-so needs this information for you. They need you to put this information in the CRM so they can deliver on what you're promising. You get to see how the CRM, the simple data entry thing, simple data
depending
entry
on your
thing,
CRM.
Exactly. Depending on your own brain style, even, and your own focus, attention, and all that. So there's all these things that go into it. But once you can see that it's connected to another human who is going to be delivering on your promise, you become way more invested because you're part of a plan. You don't want to be the hindrance to your own delivery. Right. Because how does it look if you then go back to that client and something hasn't happened and you didn't do that thing, but you blame it on the other person. You say, oh, our so-and-so, our customer service team didn't do that yet. Well, they didn't do it because you didn't freaking input it into the CRM.
But this is also a thing I think that people forget about culture, is that is a blame culture. It is a culture of blame. So it's me saying that, like, maybe it's that I didn't do my part, but regardless of whether or not I did my part, I'm going to blame someone else. And what people don't notice is that becomes a culture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
When people have fear of saying something in a meeting because they might get thrown under the bus, that's a culture problem.
That's absolutely a culture problem. And when there's internal culture problems, it will impact your bottom line because your customers will know.
Well, and like even Sam is saying you don't want to be the weak link, but like, but what if I was the weak link, right? Like, I'm sorry. I say this to people all the time, especially when I drop the ball. I'm sorry. I dropped the ball here.
Yeah.
I am now back on the court. Here's what I'm doing. And here's how I'm going to fix it. But literally, I dropped the ball.
But you then admitted it. But you didn't just say, sorry, guys, I dropped the ball. Oops. Yeah. You said, sorry, I dropped the ball. Here's what I'm doing to fix it. And so those are two very different approaches and two very different cultures. Right. And so because I've dropped the ball before on my own clients way back when, and I'm sure at some point I will again, right? Because I'm human, but it's how we respond to our dropping of the balls. It's how we deal with what we may have not done as we had promised. And it's always coming to the table with that. And here's how I'm going to improve it or fix this or not have this happen again. Even if it is an internal process, you still share that with the customer and say, here, I took this seriously and this is what we're doing because we value you as our customer, blah, 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 right? So
yeah. I love it. Okay, so there's one other thing that's come up in the chat that I want to make sure we talk about today. So Sam was sharing employees are 100% waiting to be invited in and listened to. But you can't change a culture until everyone is waiting for their turn to contribute. And Andrew had shared something farther up. I'm not going to go and try and find it, about how everybody needs to be invested in this. I want to challenge that a little bit because I feel like if you haven't been intentional with your brand, with your DNA to begin with, you're likely going to have people working in your organization who never were in alignment with your brand and actually can't be aligned with the version of the brand you're trying to create. And so I would challenge that this is not about a 100%, mostly because I don't believe in 100%, that this is about a commitment and an intention to say, like, this is what we're doing. And there's going to be some people who aren't aligned with it. And that is an inherent risk of deciding that I am going to really intentionally commit to this brand, this internal brand experience, this external brand experience, because this is where we're going. What are your thoughts on that?
Agree. Period. Absolutely. I agree. Because not everyone, they may not even be a fit right then, but you know what? Who cares is probably the attitude that's there. It's, oh, I get paid. This is my paycheck is just a job. And you know what? To some people, that's how it will always be. And that's okay because there are companies that have that same attitude. Not wrong, just their way of being. And so when a company gets super intentional about this is our culture, these are the actions, these are our values, these are the values and actions. How are you going to be demonstrating this within your own role? How do you see yourself connected to this larger organism? How are you helping to contribute to the body of the business? Some people are going to be like, oh, I almost swore. Oh, shoot. I don't want this. And then they're either going to not perform and eventually they're going to have a hard conversation to be goodbye, or they're going to self-select and say, I'm going to go and find a different place because this is just not for me. And that's okay. That's okay. But it's also on to the leadership team to have the courage to look at somebody who may have the knowledge of the company, but not have the culture of the company to say, do we risk keeping this individual on and spreading a cancer, even unintentionally, throughout our business? Or do we cut the cancer and then see what can grow. Are we pruning a rose bush, so to speak? Are we cutting the right branches, even if they're healthy branches, so that we can grow even bigger? I'm not a guide. I got that analogy from Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud. So please know I kill a lot of plants. Probably because I don't prune them right. But I
Moral
also
of the story, learn how to prune your plants.
Learn how to prune your bushes. But one thing we really also haven't covered, which I think is so crucial to touch on, is all the generations now that are coming into the companies and how different Generation Z, Canadian, Z is coming into this.
Or Z for our American friends.
Z for our American friends, yes. In case you're like, Z, what the hey? So they're coming in. How are they interacting with millennials? How are millennials acting with Generation X, who's now becoming the higher levels of the business, the faces, so on and so forth, as the baby boomers go out? Leave, I shouldn't say, is how I should say that. But so we're having not just these transitions of ownership, of leaders, of all that, we're having complete transitions of what people want in their job now. Complete cultural different understandings, complete worlds that we've grown up in. Generation Z is so much more emotionally intelligent than all of us ahead, right? And so they understand if there's this non-emotional component above, they're just going to go to find the next gig, so to speak, because it's not as important to get the house, to settle down, to really build that portfolio as it was to, say, my parents who were in their 70s, right? So it's not just the individual people, it's the individual people within the certain generations that they're coming forth, that they're coming into.
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting too, because one of the things that I have realized in my individual personal brand coaching is that while in different generations, we have grown up with different things we aspire to be, there is still a lot of similarities that are available between people that bridge the generation gap, right? So one of the things that I thought for a long time is that it's the millennials who are piecing, and I'm a millennial, right? So it's the millennials that are piecing together all of this intelligence that we learned from our parents who are boomers, and this new information with the emotional intelligence, and how can we have these two things play together instead of being disparate. But one of the things, actually, my good friend Jay, who is in the chat right now, taught me is that there are people who have been doing that for years, right?
Yeah, totally
it's not and Jay does that amazingly, right? And I'm sure there's people younger than me, the Gen Zers, who are doing it too, right? So there's also, and this is something that's big for me, right? This ability for us to see past an age demographic or a gender or a cultural background or any of those things, because we don't know what we might have in common. And when we open up our eyes to say hey, oh, we're actually the same. And yeah, sure, maybe we share an age bracket difference, right? But we actually believe
different boxes.
Right. But we believe the same things, right? And we've actually been working towards the same things. And this is the whole point, right? Is that when you get people who have matching DNA, so you have a brand DNA, and you get people who match your brand DNA because it matches their brand DNA.
Yep.
Then we don't have this disconnection between people, but it takes both sides playing their role. It takes a company standing up and being brave and saying, this is our brand DNA. Is that your brand DNA? Because if it is, we would love to have you join this team. And equally, as an individual, I have to be able to say, this is my DNA. Do I know that is going to, how do I know if that's going to match, or how well will that match? And it will never be, because I don't believe in 100%, it won't be a 100% match, but it'll be a good match. Right? I think my husband and I on eHarmony matched 85% or something. That's a good match.
Oh, I love that.
I love him more than 85%. If there was a 100%, it would be I love Carter 100%.
That's the
love,
100 in your
yes,
list.
you can love people 100%. That's permission granted. But like, even I and like him and I are not 100% aligned in the way we see things and the way we do things, right? We don't like TV the same amount and all of these things, right? Like this is something that is going to happen to humans. There's no 100% alignment between humans. But when we stand for who we are and businesses stand for who they are, it creates the opportunity for a match to happen. And I would say that in these times of change, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about a rebrand, is like owning your DNA from both sides. And let's go out and find matches.
Let's do eHarmony for business.
eHarmony for business.
There's probably... It'll call B-Harmony. Sorry.
We're super creative.
Actually, I'm not apologizing. That's amazing.
eHarmony. I kind of love it. Lindsay and I might create it. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, folks.
All right. We've done it again, and we've come up over at our 1 hour time block. Lindsay, for those of the people who are watching this episode who are new to you today, where is the best place for them to connect with you if they'd like to learn more about you and how you help organizations?
Yeah, so you can find me on brpconsulting.ca, because that's business are people, is what I believe. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, as that's the playground I play in, called Lindsay Harle-Kadatz. I am Lindsay Harle-Kadatz. You can find me on LinkedIn as Lindsay Harle-Kadatz. Oh my goodness.
And if you like to sing your sentences sometimes, you should definitely connect with Lindsay. Because that's part of her fun personal brand that I appreciate so much. And one day we'll go to karaoke together and harmonize. Now that's a brand. I'm not sure what that we talked about that Sam is referring, but that's a brand. Lindsay is one of my favorite brands. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful expertise with us today, Lindsay. Thank you to Sam and Andrew and Jim and Jay and Vanessa and Dan and everybody and LinkedIn user who I'm still not sure who you are for getting in the chat today. I know. Like, message me after and let me know it was you. I'm sure it's somebody I know, but I don't know which one. Thank you so much for sharing your voices in the conversation. The more voices we have in the conversation, the more all of us get to learn. And just like I end every episode with, if this is a conversation that you are excited to be in, or you're personally exploring, or your company is exploring right now, please don't let this be the last conversation of this topic that you are in. Connect with me, connect with Lindsay, connect with the other peeps who are in the chat who are also in this conversation, and keep the conversation going, because a rebrand is an evolution, and it doesn't happen just because one conversation happened. Let's keep it going. B-Harmony. I think that's actually a band, or somebody who's in a band. B-Harmony.
I don't know. We'll have to look that up and see about the copyrights.
Trademark.
Yeah, thank you.
A whole bunch of things. It's all good. It's Friday afternoon. Our mouths aren't working anymore. It's all good. Thank you so much, everybody. And until next time, permission to do you.